right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. This time from this side of the Pacific, close to the Pacific, we're glad to be with you. But here's Jacob Prash. How are you, Jacob?
Well, it's good to be in the same time zone as you are. We're both in California at the moment. I'm in Los Angeles. You're in the Inland Empire in the far eastern suburbs of Los Angeles. But we just couldn't be together in the same room due to flight schedules. But here we are together. A lot is happening in the world, and all of them together synergistically point to the return of Jesus. Aren't we happy?
Amen. Well, Jacob, I'm so glad that you're on this side. We're on the same time zone. We'll be together pretty soon tomorrow, Sunday. So it'll be a great thing. So I'm so glad, so blessed that you're here. So those who are watching today, those who will watch later, so glad that you are joining us and so blessed to have you on. Jacob, how do you like being in the communist state of California?
Well, I was in Boston, and that's extremely left-wing. Then I was in New York, and it was extremely left-wing. Then I was in Tennessee, which is still a free country. But now I'm back. Now I'm back in the land of the Marxists. So it depends on which state you're in. I got to go to Iowa, which is free, and then Ohio is under debate. So after this, so we'll see what happens. But I wish it was only California. It's not.
Yes, and Jacob, you said it right, exactly as it is. It is a split country. It is not necessarily free as many people would think, although many politicians think it is. But we'll be talking about that today. But just to let everybody know, those who are watching on Moriel, be alert. Joining us. Thank you for joining us, and this will be up soon on our channels as well. So we had a little trouble getting this recorded because of all the different flight schedules, but so glad you made it, Jacob. So the Lord has provided an opportunity for us to be on, and this will be a shortened catching up with Jacob, but we're thanking you so much for making that time. I know it's tiring and you got to go from place to place. So we do thank you. We do appreciate you taking that time. You're going to be on tomorrow and on Sunday at Community Church of Devore. You're going to be with us 2 sessions tomorrow and 1 on Sunday.
Right.
We're going to do the Old Testament in light of the New, and you got a whole different teaching on Sunday.
Correct. And then we'll be with John Haller after that in Ohio.
And then you're heading back home.
Then I'm going back to Britain. Then I'm going, I think, to Holland. And then you and I are both going to Israel. We got
a date in Israel. Let's go to Jerusalem. Let's go to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I think those are the only things. Anything else on your mind, Jacob, you want to let our viewers know?
More than I can say in the time we have. So let's just get down to business. We got a time bomb.
All right. No worries. Hey, Jacob, real quick, before we get into the meat of the thing, you and I watched a little video of a gentleman, Piers Corbin. He's an astrophysicist, which Bojo says he's the quintessential best meteorologist in the world today. And he had some interesting things to say about what the world calls basically carbon, man-made global warming due to carbon and all those things. He had some interesting things to say, and he literally pierced through the deceit that's going on in the world. He sounded just like what we've been saying. He sounded a lot like you.
Russia's deadly wildfires, the smog-filled cities and poor harvest are being seen by some environmentalists as signs of climate change. Let's now cross live to London to discuss this with Piers Corbin. He's an astrophysicist and also founder of Weather Action. Good to have you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us live there in London. So what we're seeing here is a drastic change in climate, aren't we?
Well, climate has always been changing, but this has nothing to do with man. In fact, we predicted that there would be extreme heat in East Europe and Russia this summer. And it's caused by a certain circulation pattern. CO2 does not cause circulation patterns. What causes those is a combination of solar activity and the state of the phases of the moon.
But hang on, Piers, excuse me, just a minute. You say this isn't caused by man. How come they're reporting this heat wave is recognised as the worst in 1,000 years of recorded history in Russia? And surely of course, man has got something to do with this, hasn't he?
No, nothing to do with it. The only connection is man is here at the same time as the sun and the moon are doing things. You see, a very similar situation happened about 132 years ago, where there was the same sun, earth, lunar, magnetic states. There was heat waves in Russia, and there were also floods in Pakistan as now. And in the previous few years, there was also floods in the English summers, also 132 years ago. So these things are dictated by solar activity in the moon. They're nothing to do with mankind, and those who say that are just trying to make money out of carbon.
But are we not going to see
trading
this?
and the like.
Are we not going to see this again next year, the year on? I mean, it's quite recent that
that's a very interesting question. These things do come in bursts, and we're working on that very question, those forecasts. We did say there would be a series of wet summers in England, for example, which we've had. Now, will there be a series of these very hot summers in Russia? We don't know. We have to work on that. But I assure you, it's nothing to do with carbon dioxide. And if you stop driving around Moscow, it won't affect next summer one jot.
Well, how come then so many climate change scientists disagree with you and they get so much support for what they say?
They're on a gravy train, for heaven's sake, there, mate.
Any thoughts on Mr. Corbyn?
Yeah, well, I'm not a astrophysicist or a meteorologist, but I'm thankful that there is at least one who's telling the truth. He understands the reality that what we are seeing with global warming is part of a natural meteorological cycle. It is not humanly induced. He's telling the truth that those scientists who are saying it is are basically left-wing academics from academic institutions who are on a political gravy train. And he's able to explain aspects that obviously I'm not qualified to, because he understands the impact of solar and lunar phases. Historically, 132 years ago, the same exact weather we have now happened 132 years ago. So, I mean, I'm glad that there's experts saying what I've said and what the author Michael Crichton said. Michael Crichton is, of course, educated as a physician, but he was a Hollywood scriptwriter and author. But he wrote one of the first books about the myth of global warming and climate change and how they're lying about it. See, nobody denies this climate change. It's just that it's the source of it is the issue. And you've got people who are not even scientists saying ridiculous things.
Yeah, like well, you got Leonardo DiCaprio. You have politicians like John Kerry. You have other actors and what was that girl's name from England? Oh man, how dare you? How dare you, girl? You know, saying things.
Yeah, she's from Scandinavia.
Oh, she's from Scandinavia. Okay. She sounded British for some reason. But she's saying ridiculous things.
Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous things. Totally, you know, and again, it's just like the woke agenda. They don't care about blacks, about homosexual rights. It's simply a political platform. Is a political mechanism to drive a globalist agenda. It has nothing to do with climate change. These things have nothing to do with upward mobility of ethnic minorities or racial minorities. Nothing to do with human rights. They don't care about those things. In fact, they'll even suppress them themselves. It's simply an agenda.
Oh yeah, Greta Thunberg. Thank you, Greta Thunberg. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, Jacob, you're not going to tune into Al Sharpton because he says the biggest problem in the world is carbon. He's got his own show, and he's.
Well, look, if Al Sharpton wants to say the biggest problem in the world is hot air, he ought to know. You just listen to him. He's not even an educated man.
No, he says he's a reverend.
Yeah, the reverend is a bouncer in a Harlem strip joint on a Friday night. He's not even an educated person.
Yeah. And he's got his own show on weather, and he says the biggest problem is carbon.
He's a meteorologist, right?
Yeah, as much as the Pope is. I guess as much as the Pope is, right? Jacob, you're in LA, and these things not only about climate change and all these things are very high on the list of liberal states, exactly like the one you and I are in today, but also the violence and the drugs. I mean, democratic cities are an epidemic, and they are literally multiplying throughout the world and throughout the state, especially here in America. But you've seen the rise of not only heroin use, but now fentanyl. And you and I talked about a video that we watched from Kensington Street in Philadelphia, some of the interviews in San Francisco. People are hooked on not just meth, not just heroin, but fentanyl now. And it takes about $60 a day, they say. They got it down to a science. They got to get $60 a day in order to keep their habit going. I guess drugs are pretty cheap now. I'm not exactly sure how that works.
Well, years ago, before I walked with the Lord, if my cocaine habit was coverable by $60 a day, I would think it was a summer sale. I mean, let's not go there. Let's not go. The fentanyl is coming from China. Most of it is manufactured in China. Most of it is coming across the border illegally with the blessings of the Democratic Party. They are killing people. They are killing people, particularly minorities, but they're killing a lot of other people with opioids, but most seriously fentanyl. In the big cities controlled by Democrats. They're murdering people.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I guess the criminals are not just on the streets, Jacob, right? But they're in political offices. Those are the real criminals.
That's correct.
With the policies. And I was in Denver. It looked just like LA. LA just looks like Denver. It's just no different.
Anywhere the Democratic Party is, you got Harris basically giving you a green light to bring this stuff across the border. Then you have a stupid, lying has-been called Whoopi Goldberg saying that the border situation is only a situation because they've made it a brown issue.
Oh.
What about the massive numbers of Hispanics who are turning against the Democratic Party and whose jobs are being taken by illegal immigrants? What about the massive numbers of Latino Americans, American citizens, and Latinos who immigrated legally, losing their jobs and having high crime in their neighborhoods because of this?
No.
She's just a liar. She's just a liar. The woman is, you got idiots and you got liars. Whoopi Goldberg seems to be both. Like the other woman they're all like that on the.
Yeah. They got the award. They got the award for best liar.
Yeah, they had 2 Oscars, one for best idiot and one for best liar.
Yeah. I guess they weren't too happy when they bust some migrants into Kamala Harris' neighborhood right in front of her house.
I think it was wonderful. I think what Mr. DeSantis did is highly honorable. I think you should get a medal. Bring them up to Martha's Vineyard where they belong and let the liberal Democrats have to put up with the consequences.
Yeah. I mean, they literally want to lynch DeSantis this weekend because of what he did, and call it political maneuvering.
I applaud what he did.
Yes, yeah, it is exactly what they're doing to every city. But Jacob, the criminal gang that runs the White House, and Biden should be impeached for many reasons, a plethora of reasons. But one thing that Americans haven't really quite calculated yet is the executive order. I mean, he's doing this by executive orders. The first one that I want to ask you about is the one of the digital transaction. The digital transaction is basically the CBDC that's coming on March 9, 2022, 14067. And it's basically a control grid, a digital control grid where not only they'll know what you're buying, but where you're buying it, and they will dictate what you could buy. Because they literally can program. It's programmable money. It's programmable money. Yep. And this is Section 4, which is treacherous. It's literally, giving the international, the Bank of International Settlements, control over that currency, whatever it is. It's going to be called, but it's going to be a digital dollar. Your thoughts on that one, Jacob? Then I'll ask you about the other one.
For people who don't know, the Bank of International Settlements is in Geneva, Switzerland, and it was set up after World War I. And it basically would be the relinquishing of the control of our monetary policies to an international body indirectly. Now, if you understand what's happening, again, it's part of the globalist agenda. This is not conspiracy theory, it's what he's actually done. Barack Obama was the one who said, I don't have the support in Congress, so I'm going to rule with a pen and a cell phone. He made executive orders into something they were never intended to be.
Right.
We desperately need legislation, if not amendments, certainly legislation, where there is congressional veto power, where Congress can veto an executive order, because it is basically absolutism. remember the Democratic Party and the left, they tried to circumvent the voters and the elected representatives of the voters. They tried to circumvent the idea of a democratic republic two ways: political misuse of the judiciary and executive orders, absolutism, just executive order, that you nullify the power of Congress. That is what they are doing. It's what they're doing with the court systems when they can, and it's what they're certainly doing with executive orders. There needs to be a congressional veto power over executive orders.
Absolutely, no doubt. And yeah, Obama used to say, I have, what is he, had a BlackBerry. I think he loved the BlackBerry. A BlackBerry and a pen. I could do anything I want, including giving off the internet, giving the internet to international body of the UN to control that. Now Biden gives basically the international banks, BIS, the Banks of International Settlements, control of really the central bank. I mean, it wouldn't even be our central bank that controls the currency anymore.
That is correct. And the media will underreport it. They won't really say it.
Incredible. Jacob, what about the other one? This is the National Biotechnology and Biomanufacturing Initiative. That's a mouthful, in which he signed on September 12th, basically just a few days ago. Transhumanism, genetic manipulation. This is an executive order. I'll read you what it says at the very top of that executive order. It says, we need to develop genetic engineering technologies and techniques to be able to write circuitry for cells and predictably programming biology in the same way in which we write software for computer programs.
You're going to biogenetically engineer human beings the way they misuse the school system to politically engineer a generation of children, not teaching them how to think, but what to think, not educating them, but indoctrinating them. What they're doing with the school system, now they want to do with biogenetic engineering. Mm-hmm. Now, whose idea was this? It's called eugenics. Adolf Hitler. This was a cardinal foundational principle of the Third Reich. Hitler, of course, he had a Nietzschean idea of the Übermensch, which he applied to the Aryan racial superiority. Okay, that's what he wanted to do. Biden is not the first fascist, an enemy of freedom, to do this. Hitler was. He's just following in Hitler's footsteps. As I've said many times, people are saying Marxism, Marxism, Marxism. No, there's another form of socialism. I've been saying this for maybe 3 years, certainly since Biden came to office. There's another form of socialism that was not Stalinist or Maoist, that was absolutely socialist, but resembles more what Obama and Biden are doing, and that is the National Socialist Workers' Party. That is the Third Reich. They have more in common with the Third Reich. That kind of socialism. The brown shirts, they're using Black Lives Matter and things like this, and Antifa the way Hitler used brown shirts. Same idea.
Brown shirts. Oh yeah, they're back in the picture. Those brown shirts, Jacob. But
now they're saying it's brown skins, but
yeah. But this, of course, is with the blessing of the HHS. So HHS is totally on board with the Secretary of Health, and they'll submit a report basically saying, yeah, biomanufacturing. So not only foods, but also I guess the medicine that you take will all be engineered that way, with the purposes of shaping your cells the way they think. Gene therapy, basically. It's another form of gene therapy.
Look, if you want to, they call it in Europe, they have a nickname, Frankenfood. If you want to use biogenetic engineering with plants in order to increase agricultural production, okay, there's debates and disputes about that scientifically and so forth, but okay, that's one situation. But when you are tampering with the chromosomal makeup of a human in any sense, that's something completely different.
Yeah. So they're messing with health. They're messing with the environment. You know, the idea of climate change, energy production, food production, supply chains. Now they're going right into the human body.
Yes, we have to understand also, all of this all of this must be considered in the divine prohibition in the Torah God gave to the Jews, not to mix the seed.
Mm.
Now, I know we're not under the law, we're not under the Torah, but there's a spiritual and theological meaning under the idea of mixing seed. It's something evil. Chimeras, demonoids. You had demonoids who could copulate and reproduce with human women in the days of Noah. And Jesus said it will be just as in the days of Noah. And as I've been saying for 30 years or more, that biogenetic engineering in the hands of fallen man are going to be able to facilitate what happened in the days of Noah. You're going to have demonoids who are going to be able to biologically copulate and reproduce with humans. And you're going to produce what happened then, the Anakim, the Gibborim, these things just as in the days of Noah. This is not science fiction. It is just science.
Nowadays, yeah, it is exactly science. So, Jacob, your study, that goes back in the 90s.
25, 30 years.
Yeah, and you just redid it not too long ago. So
Yeah.
it is relevant. I think somebody mentioned to me this week, Jacob, I heard this message from Jacob 20, 30 years ago. It sounds like just for today. It sounds like just for today. So
I saw it coming. I did. Look, I'm not saying God gave me a prophecy, just call it sanctified human deduction, but I saw it coming.
Now, if you are against this, Jacob, let's say you're an opponent of this and you are in the opposition party, whatever that may be now, with the Republicans actually working together with the Dems, but let's say you are an opponent to this and you're standing up against it, there's a purge going on. I don't think people realize this, even among Christians, there is a purge, no doubt, no less, a purge of anybody who stands in the way of this cabal. And that is, that's Trump, that's Steve Bannon, that's Mike Lindell, that's anybody that opposes it. Not saying we agree with everything these guys say or do, but the reality of it is if you oppose Biden and the cabal, you are an enemy, and they'll use the FBI as we've seen it.
Yes, but you see, first of all, there's the naive foolishness of Christians, conservatives, libertarians who say Republican as if they are the alternative. As we always have said, the Republican Party establishment, the rhinos, people like McConnell, people like the Bush dynasty, Cheney, Murkowski, people of this nature are no different and no better than the Democrats. They will collaborate with the Democrats against conservatives, against Trump, against libertarians. The Republican Party itself is split. The same as the Democratic Party is split between the populists, which is like Bernie Sanders, and the traditional Democrats who are left center. Now you have a split in the Republican Party since Trump. You actually do have a real conservative element in the Republican Party for the first time since Barry Goldwater against the establishment. Now, in the 60s, you had the Rockefeller faction. They were the establishment Republicans were controlled by Nelson Rockefeller and his brothers, David Rockefeller and so forth. The Rockefellers controlled it then. Well, it's the same thing now. You've got the Bush dynasty, you've got Mitch McConnell. These people, don't say Republicans are your friends. It depends on the Republican.
Right. What kind of Republican, right? Now, Tim Ryan, who is a congressman running for Congress in Ohio, recently came out and said, look, we got to kill MAGA extremists, kill the movement of MAGA extremists. You have that lady in, what was it, Hawaii. What was her name? Hirono, yeah. Hirono, who says, this is a call to war, call to arms if you oppose us on the abortion issue. So we've seen Democrats, the Democrats go on the offense and saying, we're coming after you. And they literally said, the person that we will work with will be the mainline Republicans. They say, we'll work with the main. Sure. Well, of course, they might as well work within their own party.
Well, you had people like John McCain. John McCain saved Obamacare. John McCain saved Obamacare. Of course they will. Now, there's Hirono from Hawaii, and she's not a very intelligent woman. She basically gets the ethnic vote to get herself elected. But what she was the one who, in the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court Justice, actually said, Kavanaugh, she actually said, a woman has a right to be believed. Because a woman makes an accusation that becomes factually evidential and admissible in a legal or judicial proceeding. She's a woman. She said it, therefore it's true. She said it. She actually said that. Now, she's either that stupid, which I think she is, or she's just wicked. Now, she took an oath to uphold the Constitution. That is fundamentally anti-constitutional and anti-American. Why wasn't she at least censored by the Senate and removed from office?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like you're right, Jacob. She's not very intelligent. She doesn't. I mean, she gets the vote because of default. I guess in Hawaii they want to be so liberal that she's a woman. She's this. She's that. She's an ethnic. She's Polynesian or whatever she is. And so she gets the vote, but she's completely hypocritical. I wish they would have said those things where, the women that said things about Bill Clinton, or they said things about,
the way that the liberals play the race card and manipulate blacks to vote for them. Like Biden, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. You know what I mean? Well, they do the same thing with Polynesians or any other minority. they tried to do it with Hispanics, but it's failing. They tried to do it with Hispanics, but it's failing. But they still do it with blacks. They do it with Polynesian, Hawaiian Americans, and they tried to do it with Native Americans, with Indians. They've always tried to do that. That's the whole woke agenda. You get people who we think we can easily manipulate and just use.
Yes.
Now, there are people like Candace Owen and so forth who see through this and try to warn what it is. But good luck.
Yeah. I mean, Biden makes those ridiculous, and the last one, of course, the one he did, he sounded like a brain damaged Mussolini, coming against people and coming and calling out to arms against anybody that's MAGA. But Jacob, the reality is that they have purged. They're purging people. We were sitting here last week, and when we were talking about Steve Bannon, unbeknownst to us, there was 35 other conservatives who were being raided by the FBI on the same day. Where we were talking about Bannon.
Pray that God raises his hand against the FBI. That organization needs to be replaced, as I've said multiple times. It has never been any good. Going back to the corruption of J. Edgar Hoover himself, even though he was right-wing. It has always been an enemy of democracy. It never should have been part of the national security apparatus, counterintelligence. It never should have been involved in that. That goes back to personal rivalry between J. Edgar Hoover and the Dulles brothers, back to the 50s, 1950s. The FBI should not be involved in it. But now you see something else. This week, it begins to become divulged in the Durham investigations that it was not just Steele who wrote the dossier that was paid for by the Clinton administration. The FBI were involved in the fabrication of what they knew to be bogus evidence to apply for the FISA warrants. This is open political corruption. The FBI may as well change its initials to KGB. It is the political Gestapo. It has no right to exist. It needs to be replaced by a legitimate investigative arm of the Justice Department that is not involved in national security. It needs to be replaced, not corrected, not reformed, not amended. It needs to be abolished and replaced.
Here. That's right. I agree. Jacob, how did pulling the wool over the American eyes when Biden comes on and he's celebrating the Inflation Reduction Act, while at the same time $1.6 trillion with a T, $1.6 trillion gets wiped off the market on the same day, and he's dancing around stage saying, we beat inflation. How can they do this and people still believe that is actually happening?
Well, there are people who have subhuman intelligence who will believe what they're told by the mainstream media and social media. These are people who, although they have subhuman intelligence, they have as much right to vote as an intelligent human being. They're called liberals. They'll believe what they are told, and they'll do it. I watched news clips of Memphis. Now, Tennessee is a conservative state, but Memphis is a liberal city in it. Texas is a conservative state, but Austin is a liberal enclave in it, okay? They've got these enclaves. And when you talk to the people, well, I'm not blaming Mr. Biden. He's doing the best he can. He inherited it. There's actually people saying he inherited something. Forget the fact that petroleum was half the price, gasoline was half the price. Forget the fact that you didn't have this kind of food inflation. Forget the fact that what happened in the Ukraine and Afghanistan at the border wouldn't have happened under Donald Trump. Forget that. He inherited. Now, if you have people that stupid, what are you going to do? They have the same right to vote as an intelligent person. That is unfortunate. But that is, as Churchill said, democracy is a very bad form of government. But never forget it, because the others are so much worse. Now, look, these people, and I'm in Los Angeles now, in a hotel room in Los Angeles, to save electricity, to stop blackouts, or to help stop blackouts, you have to have at least 76 degrees regulated temperature in the hotel room. You can't go with the temperature to 70 or 72. It's got to be 76 degrees. In the wintertime, they're going to tell people you can't have heat. It's got to be 65 or 68 degrees. Put on a sweater. Now, where are these happening? Democratic states. If that's what you voted for, that's what you got. They're complaining about what's sometimes called shrinkflation. Oh, we're not raising the prices, we're just putting less milk in the bottle. Okay. And they say who did you vote for? People who voted Democrat have no right to complain. They've got what they voted for. They need to stop whinging and suck up and take responsibility and reap the consequences of their own decisions. They need to understand that they are merely suffering the ramifications of their own stupidity. Even though it was democratically expressed, if you want to be a moron, you get the ramifications of being a moron. Well, they have no right to complain. It is only people who do not vote for people like Biden or Obama who have the right to complain, not people who did. They have no right to complain. They got what they voted for. They did this. They caused it.
Absolutely, Jacob. August CPI numbers came in over 8%, which is probably more than that, the CPI numbers, but groceries are up. You know what's down? It's monthly earnings. Hourly earnings and monthly earnings have fallen another 3% under Biden. So things are going high and people are earning less, which is basically Biden is the pay cut president. You know, basically everybody's taking a pay cut under him and having to spend so much more, and it's here to stay. I don't think the Federal Reserve is going to do anything to fight inflation.
No, well, they're raising interest rates, which will cause recession.
Yeah,
they'll create a recessionary environment, but they're not going to control the inflation with raising interest rates the way they did in the 70s. Not under Joe Obama. It's just not possible. It's just the figures aren't there and aren't going to be. Well, they called the Inflation Reduction Act. You know what? You know, that would be like saying the Sobriety Act and giving subsidies to saloons. You know, it's not going to stop inflation. It's not going to reduce inflation. It's going to perpetuate it. And Manchin, knowing that, Manchin sold out. He was the closest thing there seemingly was to a traditional Democrat left in the Senate, in the tradition, say, of Sam Nunn or of Scoop Jackson or JFK or a sane Democrat. At least he was the last vestige of sanity in the Democratic Party, except for that woman is good, but she's not in power. What's her name? Gabbard?
Oh, yeah. She's from, I think she's from Hawaii. Yeah.
I don't know why she's in the Democratic Party, because she has a brain. You know,
Tulsi Gabbard.
Why is the same person in a lunatic asylum voluntarily? I don't understand that. But apart from Manchin was the last guy who was a traditional Democrat, and now he's gone. He sold out to Biden, and he had political interest for doing it. His wife was in control of a lot of the federal funding through some organization she's on, for the distribution of federal assistance in that Appalachian region. I mean, he seems to have been bought and paid for. there's absolutely no stop it. Inflation reduction. They're not going to reduce inflation.
No.
No.
Jacob, FedEx comes on today, and after taking a beating, over 20% loss today on the FedEx stock, 22%. They warn about global recession. They cut their sales forecast by $500 million with the B, $500 million. They cut it. This is the bombshell. This is FedEx, who's got this huge organization, huge global. It's got impact in Europe. It's got very much offices in Europe. They control a lot of the packaging in Europe. Obviously, DHL and UPS are probably the next ones that are just as productive. But they come out and say, we're going to have to shorten our sales forecast. It is a global depression. They're admitting it.
Yes, with the online shopping, watch Amazon and FedEx.
Oh,
yes,
boy.
you say DHL and Parcel Post and those other things, UPS. Yes, but it's Amazon and FedEx are the two to watch the most. Okay, and there's other ones, but Amazon and FedEx are the main ones. Okay, they're the two. But now with COVID, their vitality was accentuated because of online shopping. People couldn't get out to stores and things like this. So again, FedEx and Amazon became lifelines to people who were locked in their homes in a lot of places, including whole countries like Britain. Okay, people in the USA just think of Amazon as an American company. I assure you it isn't. You should see the size of the distribution center of Amazon in England. I've driven by it. You wouldn't believe it. Be that as it may, look how big they were during the pandemic. Now that the pandemic is over, look what's happening. When you have a company of that size losing 22% of its equity value in one day, a 22% decline in equity value on the New York Stock Exchange in one day.
That's just incredible.
And you have people insane enough to listen to Biden, the economy's doing well. You know what? If you believe that, and if you believe the New York Slimes and the Washington Compost, and you believe this stuff, you're a baboon, eat bananas. But don't whinge and complain, because it's what you voted for at the ballot box.
Yeah, bananas might be too expensive now too, Jacob.
Yeah.
So, there goes that. Jacob, but also it's across Europe, it's across Asia. This is the pan-European stocks, which is the pan-European stock 600, down over 1%, which is a big loss from the previous day. The Germany's DAX, 0.5%. France was down, France was down 0.33%. I mean, this is the overall market. I mean, this is.
But on the other side of the Atlantic, it is the TI in London and the DAX that matter the most. All of the others are going to follow the DAX and the TI. What happens in the French stock exchange in Italy and so forth, those are second-rate performers. It is the DAX in Germany and the TI in London.
Yeah.
They are to Europe and Britain what Wall Street is to the United States.
This is, of course, precipitated by the natural gas shortage. This is triggering food crisis. This is triggering energy crisis. I mean, people are on the streets rampaging, and in some countries, it's causing the energy crisis. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the violence that is allowed in places like London, where you have populations of immigrants that are going in there and they literally are slashing each other. This is in front of a church. This is in front of the Church of England, two Muslims going at each other. But in other areas,
again, I think that is emblematic spiritually and theologically. I think it's a symbolic, emblematic expression in front of a church, a Christian church, Muslims killing Muslims. That shows you that it's Christianity that brings civility and stability to a society. That Islam can only bring jihad, and most jihads are Muslims killing Muslims. I think that incident you referred to on the video news clip is emblematic. I think it's a portrait of what Islam is globally.
Very true. And of course, the energy crisis, the food crisis. I mean, the UK is warning they're going to have riots if they don't give people money for food. And but then there was a political earthquake in Sweden. I want you to talk a little bit about that, Jacob. That in some countries, it just immigration is just rampant. I mean, I don't know how many boats per day the UK, the England receives or allows to come in. Italy's trying to fend them off, but there's boat after boat, migrants coming into the UK. Sweden had something different, a political earthquake. The actual a political party, the what they call the Democrats, will be the right-wing Democrats that they call them, actually won the election. Their slogan was "Make Sweden Safe Again," and their platform was anti-immigration, anti-immigration platform, and they won. I mean, we're talking Sweden, who has become Malmo itself, one of the cities there, have become just the emblematic of the violence by migrants coming in there. So, Jacob, are you seeing some countries turning this around?
Okay, let's understand three particular factors. Let's begin with Britain. You mentioned them first. I am happy that the new prime minister is going to release fracking regulations in Britain and allow for increased domestic production of energy and of oil. Now, it does not have as much oil as the United States, but it has some oil. At least she's going to allow fracking. Remember, this shortage you see, these price increases that have benefited Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iran, and Putin are all courtesy of Joe Obama. It's Biden and Joe Obama who caused it. She is removing a lot of the restrictions on fracking in Great Britain. She's doing the right thing. But now let's look at Europe with the immigration policies. Okay. Sweden, not only Sweden, but mainly more than any other country in Europe, and certainly far more than any other country in Scandinavia, Sweden was the model of the kind of liberal socialism that Obama and his ilk tried to emulate the United States should be, with Obamacare and things of this nature. It doesn't work in Sweden, yet that's what Obama wanted to imitate and emulate. Okay, so you have these liberal immigration policies. I've been to Malmo, Sweden, a few times. Malmo, it's a big city, and it's not far from Denmark, and I've been there. You've got Muslim gangs taking over whole areas of the city. The police don't even go there. They've destroyed it. The same is happening in Rotterdam and other cities in Europe, and then certainly in places like Bradford and Birmingham in England. But you've got this. Okay. This was the picture of liberalism and open immigration and tolerance and all this, and we're going to let this. And this was Sweden. They are reaping what they sowed. Much like in the energy sector. Germany, we're going to go for 100% renewables. They reached about 85 to 88%. Greenhouse emissions increased, and energy prices went through the ceiling. They're reaping what they sowed. And that's the only positive news, is that there's a poetic justice, and that these countries and these people who vote this way, again, suffer the ramifications of their actions and decisions. Fortunate as it may be, they brought it on themselves, but they bring it on other people too. Now let's look at one third factor, another factor in Europe. I have been warning that when you see chaos and disintegration economically, politically, and sociologically, what happened with Saint-Just and Robespierre and Belat in France, what you saw happen in the Weimar in Germany after World War I, out of these things, dictators emerge. People demand protection and order and national sovereignty, and for every action there will be an equal and opposite reaction, the same as in physics, and you will have a trend. Now, I'm not against these people voting for conservatives, but beware of the fact you may get racist elements coming to power. You've got a strong racist element in Western Ukraine. I'm not saying all Ukrainians are like that, but you've got this. You've got neo-Nazis in Germany. You have You have these things. You have neo-Frankists, fascists in Spain. Definitely. Do not be surprised if you will see people coming up who will be that. Now, Le Pen may not be that herself. She supposedly repudiated the positions of her father to a degree, but she's her father's daughter. Mussolini has a daughter in Italy. You're going to see a reaction. Now, I don't mean a conservative national reaction to protect themselves from Islamic aggression and from a parasitic community of immigrants who hate them yet want to live there. You know, if you hate our Western civilization so much, why did you come here? Nobody made you leave Algeria or whatever. Okay, so there is that. My fear will be you will not get somebody who's a conservative, or you won't get a Thatcherite, you know, or someone like that. You might get a dictator. Now, I say might. That's short term. Long term, they will get a dictator, the Antichrist. The kings of the north, the kings of the south. There's going to be a conflict between the southern nations of the southern hemisphere and the nations of the northern hemisphere. And the battlefield is going to be Europe and the Mediterranean. This is from the book of Daniel. Ultimately, they will get a dictator in the character of Napoleon or something like this. And there's going to be a terrible situation that Daniel predicted happening. Not only that, but when you get these right-wing regimes, they tend to become anti-Semitic. They tend to become Jew haters. And they tend to become very unfriendly to Christians, saved Christians, because they see the church as the Staatenkirche in Germany, for instance, or the Reformish Kirche. They see the church as a nationalist institution, the way that Putin sees the Russian Orthodox Church as part of Russian patriotism and Russian nationalism. Well, these people are of the same mind. 9 of the 14 so-called evangelical bishops, Lutheran bishops in Germany, supported Hitler and the Third Reich. They see the state church as being part of the apparatus of patriotism and nationalism. And once it's taken to an extreme, you're going to have that. But born-again Christians do not see it that way, and therefore they will not be seen as the true Christians. They'll be seen as the bad Christians. It is only the religious nationalists who are the good ones. Much the same. Now it's with the liberals. If you're not a liberation theologian, if you don't think that Desmond Tutu was a saint, okay, you're an evangelical, we don't like you. You're a bad Christian. Desmond Tutu was a good one. There is a converse of that, of right-wing religious nationalism that'll come out of Europe, and saved Christians again will be caught in the middle. The left, the liberation theology people won't like them, and the religious nationalists won't like them. It'll not be good for the true body of Christ, and ultimately, I guarantee there's going to be an anti-Semitism emerging from it. It's always been like that. We have to understand these things prophetically.
It happened with Mussolini. It happened with Stalin.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we have some history. Plus, we have prophecy that says that. So it is something that we have to be very concerned about.
If you don't know history, you're never going to understand prophecy.
That's right. That's right. Jacob, real quick, we're talking about Europe. Over the past week, we're taking several steps to a major war happening in Europe, and that is another front, a couple of fronts. And we actually talked about another front that I didn't see it. We know the Ukraine-Russia front is there, and actually it has ramped up. Ukraine moved in toward the south, pushed the Russian troops away. Russia reacted to that, had some missile strikes into infrastructure, electrical grid, and water. Of course, it escalated now. They try to hit Putin. I'm not sure who tried to kill him, but there was an attempt on his life that didn't go through. But now Georgia's throwing their hat in against Russia. And now Azerbaijan is throwing their hat in against Armenia. and now they're attacking Armenia's sovereign territory. So we're open up this front. Plus, you mentioned another front. I'll let you talk about that in a moment. But you got all these fronts coming in. You got all these. It certainly has ramped up. It's not de-escalating. There's no peace talks. There's less and less peace talks. There's more and more war fronts. So, Jacob Prasch, what do you think?
As we've been saying, the Chechens are Muslims. Yet, ironically, after what Putin did to Chechnya, attacking the civilian population on a genocidal scale, you've got Chechens in the Russian army who are Muslim. Some Chechens are saying, look, what Putin did to us 20 years ago, now he's doing the same thing to the Ukrainians. Why are we fighting for him for? And in fact, there have been some Chechens siding with the Romanians. Why should we fight other Chechens for Putin? That is one thing. Azerbaijan is another. It's an Islamic country, and it is not a very good situation at all. Not at all a very good situation. But Armenia has looked to Russia for backing. Has looked to Russia for backing. Now, Armenians are not pro-communist or pro-Putin or anything like that. They're trying to survive, particularly in light of their own history of having suffered Islamic genocide.
Right.
But another factor that is happening is this. The Western CIA, let's just call it what it is, it's trying to instigate, or trying to not instigate, certainly support nationalist movements within the former CIS. And within Russia itself. Russia is a country with diverse minorities. They're not all Russian. Chechens being an outstanding example. What they're trying to do is get Putin into multiple wars. In Russia, multiple ethnic wars to bring down his regime. Whether they'll succeed or not, I don't know, but they're doing a pretty good job of it so far. We have to understand also, a lot of the people you see in the Ukraine, and I commend the bravery of the Ukrainian people, but a lot of them are mercenaries hired by the CIA and by Western intelligence. These are people who are commandos, who are special forces, who know how to fight. They know how the Russians fight. They are there certainly as advisors, and they're training the Ukrainians, and some of them are probably in active combat themselves, giving these weapons to the Ukrainians. They've not given the most advanced weapons to the Ukrainians. They could give intermediate range Jericho missiles, say, not cruise Jerichos, not not with nuclear tips, but say with 1,000-pound explosive warheads on them, and say, look, if you're going to attack Kiev, we're going to attack St. Petersburg and Moscow.
That's right.
Also providing tactical aircraft, old makes that are held by Poland and things like this. NATO, it's just Biden who's preventing it, saying, look, if you're going to send planes over Ukraine, we're going to send planes over Russia. You can wreak havoc in Russia. You can wreak havoc. I've warned for years that Putin is a Stalinist. He's not to be trusted. He's a neo-Stalinist driven by his resentment of having lost the Cold War. He's arrogant, and he's reaching the point of not being logical. We have to understand, Russia stands humiliated. This is humiliated that they haven't been able to take over the Ukraine. They are in a state of national humiliation. That's what it is. And the casualties, if they have lost over 50,000 killed, over 50,000 Russian soldiers killed. Remember, in the whole Vietnam War, Americans lost 65,000. They only 58,000 in the Korean War or something like that. Russia has already reached almost those numbers of fatalities, not to mention other casualties. And war casualties can be life-maiming. No eyes, no hands, no limbs.
Yeah.
And all he can do is go on TV and say we're winning. He sounds like Biden. We're beating inflation. All he can do is lie.
It's interesting, Jacob, because you mentioned this the multiple war fronts, and obviously it is to weaken Putin for sure. Step by step, the U.S. and NATO and the EU, of course, deliberately enticing and fomenting these things to facilitate basically more war fronts, so Putin can be weakened at some point. And this is where it gets really interesting. At some point, Russia has said, "Look, there's a conventional war against these nations. You get into U.S., you get into NATO, and you got to deal with them. That's unconventional. That's now you're talking nuclear stuff, and that's
talking
my
about a
concern.
nuclear threat. Yes, well,
That's right. That's my concern.
Putin would resort to a nuclear threat.
Yeah. What concerns me too is the deals with the other nation, a little bit just below Russia, which is China. They just slapped some sanctions on U.S. companies like Raytheon and Boeing because they're selling weapons to Taiwan. That threat of taking over Taiwan is still there. But now they're in another meeting. It's a Putin-Xi meeting, which a lot of people say this is a big meeting. This is in the East, bringing, I think it's in Kazakhstan. I think that's where the meeting is, Kazakhstan. And this is their first trip, Xi's first trip outside of China, and I think it's about 2 years. They're bringing in countries like Uzbekistan. They're bringing countries in like Russia, of course, India, to deal with this, what they call SCO, the Shanghai Organization, Cooperation Organization, the SCO, which is run by China and Russia. They're bringing in guys like Iran into this, which the president of Iran just basically said, yeah, we're interested. We want the economic avenue to export not only our oil, but other things and cooperate economically. Benny Gantz is sounding the alarm. Benny Gantz from Israel says this is bad. Something has to be done. Iran it's a threat militarily, and we're giving them, not saying we or Israel, but they're giving them the enrichment capacity via Biden and allowing this to happen, but also letting them into other economic blocks, which is only going to facilitate. So it's, of course, Jacob, we agree that Benny is correct on this, but what are the threats? Unpack that a little bit more as we're coming to the end. By the way, those who are watching, and thank you for joining us, sending your questions. We'll take a couple of questions at the end just to get Jacob on the road. But Jacob, unpack that a little more. The threat of Iran, the economic ties to China and Russia, and actually
Turkey is involved.
Yes, Turkey is involved.
When you see that triad of Turkey, Iran, and Russia, obviously it begins to raise the specter of a Gog and Magog type scenario in the thinking of the Christians. So that is obviously there. When countries are in trouble, they need to begin to consolidate. I'm not far from Raytheon. I'm at LA Airport. Raytheon has that huge building here on the south side of the airport. China needs that technology. It will try to steal that Raytheon technology. I'm not sure it's a bad thing for Raytheon or for the United States. I wouldn't have given them that technology anyway.
Correct.
Or Boeing. But be that as it may, China is in serious trouble. Russia is in serious trouble. When people are in trouble, they try to consolidate their base. They try to solidify what they've got because they're going into survival mode. China's party is going into survival mode. Putin is going into survival mode. We have to understand these meetings in Kazakhstan in that light. They're not having these meetings because they're looking for some kind of new expansionism, per se. They're having these meetings because they need to consolidate their power as best they can under the guise of an expansionism. I assure you that Japan and China are watching the Ukraine very, very carefully and understanding that if they go into Taiwan, the same thing could well happen to them.
Very true. And of course, Benny's warning about not only the deal with Iran, but also that Iran is looking for help. And I suppose having a friend like Biden in the White House with Obama there, plus Xi, plus Putin, plus Erdogan, going to make that very possible for
Look,
them
Joe Obama will betray America's interest at every possible opportunity. As we said, the way the Bush-Cheney dynasty betrayed America to the Saudi Arabians after September 11th, Joe Obama, and Biden, and Kerry and Clinton have likewise betrayed America to Iran, despite the terror and the sponsorship for terror. That's what they're doing, and giving them money.
Yeah, absolutely. And Iran seems to be very close to becoming, a big power threat, a bigger power threat, which is all the Abraham Accords is trying to prevent Iran from getting this kind of power.
Daniel 10.
Jacob, let's finish off with this before we take the questions. Did you see the Temple Institute?
Yes.
Live stream, Facebook Live.
Yes.
This is kind of odd. Facebook Live, the major advances in the efforts to raise a red heifer whose ashes will be used for purification. It's a huge step forward, they said. They even broadcast it on Facebook Live. I mean, they're into technology too, I suppose. And so a lot of people are alarmed. Jacob, just give us your view of it. Alarm, no alarm.
They came from Alabama, some of them. They were raised
Texas,
outside
Alabama.
of Israel.
Yeah, 5 red heifers.
And like anything else, the rabbis don't always agree on everything. In fact, they usually disagree. There's only one thing Orthodox rabbis will all agree on, that Jesus is not the Messiah. They will agree that their Messiah is not the Messiah. That they will agree on. They will agree that the Messiah of Israel must be rejected. But they will not agree on a lot of other things. So you're going to see conflicting rabbinic opinions, and it will be settled as a matter of some kind of theocratic politicking. But we have a teaching tape that we did a number of years ago, not 20, but certainly maybe close to 10 years ago or so, maybe 8 years ago, called The Red Heifer. I would urge people to watch it, or to avail themselves of it on Moriel.org, The Red Heifer.
Yeah, maybe we should put it on.
Okay. Okay. Now, remember, with prefabrication, the temple can be rebuilt in 18 months. 18 months by prefabricating it and then putting the pieces together on the Temple Mount. 18 months. I don't know any other way to understand Revelation chapter 11 than say there's going to be a tribulation temple. I realize there's spiritual meanings to it concerning the church and things like this, and the Antichrist is going to be worshipped in the apostate church. I understand all that. But I don't know any way to get around the fact that it speaks of a literal temple in Jerusalem. And I've been to the Temple Institute many, many times. I've taken groups there when we were still doing, when my health still allowed us to do Bible tours, many times. Years ago, 20 years ago, they had more than 90% of the instruments and accoutrements they needed for reintroduction of the temple rituals. They even found crustaceans in the sea near Caesarea Maritima in north central Israel, where they would crush the crustaceans and make a blue dye from it. That was the exact dye you needed for the stain the fabrics for the temple curtains. They've put a lot of work, a lot of time, and a fair amount of money into this. It could happen very, very quickly. One of the things that was preventing it was a red heifer. Well, that's not happening anymore. I would watch this very carefully.
Okay. So Jacob, you would say, hey, be aware, nothing imminent, but be aware.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Of course, this time of year, Jacob, everybody gets excited about the holiday feast of Israel. They're calling the rapture at any moment now, and the red heifer shows up. So people become completely, they lose their mind. They lose their mind on this. And so there's people calling for any minute now, people calling for the rapture today, saying that Jacob Prash, illuminate a little bit more on that before we take questions. Just rambunctiousness.
Okay. We've seen open lunacy. The pre-trib people, not all of them, but many of them went into a newfangled teaching that is not traditional pre-tribulationism, claiming that the apostasy of 2 Thessalonians is the rapture, that it's a spatial departure, based on an underlying Greek term, aposteiomai, not even found in the text, and ignoring the fact that the word apostasia, found in a cotext talking about the same subject, return of Christ, the close of the age, is used by Paul and Timothy. They just completely ignore that and treat it as if it's a hapex legomena, talking about a spatial departure. I have never seen a more irresponsible approach to exegesis. And some of the people who've gotten involved with it and swallowed it are not only wrong, they ought to be ashamed of themselves because they know better. Quote me. But now they've gone beyond that. You've seen this Nigel Farage saying that people who don't agree with pre-tribulationism are of the devil. Charles Spurgeon, Corey Ten Boom, A.W. Tozer, David Pawson. These people are, that's what he says.
Yeah, J.D. Farag, yeah.
Yeah, but now he's gone beyond that. He's saying the Lord showed him that September 11th was a deception. And it was not airplanes that crashed into the World Trade Center. That's not what brought the World Trade Center. It was pre-planned explosions. And this is all just a deception. And the Lord showed him this. And he is repackaging pre-tribulationism in this conspiracy theory about 9/11. And he preached this on the anniversary of 9/11. Notice the pre-trib people are getting more and more frantic. They're saying crazier and crazier things. Crazier.
Yeah. And instead of should be warning and preparing people for the obvious world events and current events that are happening, and diving deeper into scripture and analyzing a little more carefully in light of what's going on and what Daniel says, these things are going to be sealed until the end. They get into a lot of speculation. They get into a lot of things that, okay, some of the things may be correct in terms of world events, but it's not what they think they mean. But nevertheless, yeah. Jacob, real quick, we got 2 questions and we'll be done. Get you on the road.
Go ahead.
Will the 2 witnesses be brought up to earth, or be brought down to earth, as you could say, or are they in advance waiting to step into their ministry?
Obviously, the 2 witnesses are in heaven. In the book of Zechariah, you see them there. There's the 2 olive branches in the book of Zechariah. So there's a serious question about how they're going to show up. We address this in my book, Harpazo. In the book Harpazo, I do address this subject, but they are somehow pre-existent, either because, and quite possibly, well, obviously, because it's Enoch and Moses, or Enoch and Elijah, people have already been alive and have been raptured, and then are going to return in physical bodies. So it's a big, huge subject. I point you to the book Harpazo, but they are already alive. I'm not saying alive on earth, but they're already alive.
Very good, Jacob. That's a great question. Get Harpazo. In fact, if you're there this weekend at CCD, we have the books there. You can get a hold of one, sell your shirt, get the book, take it home with you. Jacob, last one. Jacob, what is your take?
Listen, if somebody is broke and unemployed and they want the book, we'll give it to them.
All right, you heard it here. Jacob will give you one if you can have one, and we certainly will facilitate that for sure.
If you can't
Jacob,
afford the book, we'll help. Give us what you can, or if you can't give us anything, we won't send you away without it.
Yeah, give it to Jesus. Jacob, what is your take on China and Russia using icebreakers across the Arctic? You and I talked about the Arctic because there's a big issue about climate change, but who claims the Arctic, Jacob? But why are they?
What is very interesting is that only 2 years ago, they believed because of global warming, the Northwest Passage was going to become navigable. At present, ships can only reach the North Atlantic to the North Pacific through the Bering Sea for about 6 weeks, and that has complications.
Yeah.
Belief was it was going to make Canada the replacement for the Panama Canal in reaching Atlantic to Pacific. There were people saying that only 2 years ago. The global warming people were saying that. Since then, there has been a reconcentration of permafrost, a deeper freezing taking place, which directly contradicts what the global warming activists were saying 2 years ago. Russia and China would love to have a Northwest Passage. They would love to control commerce to Europe by sailing through the Bering Straits and through the Arctic Ocean and then down into the North Atlantic. They would love to do that. China is in particular trouble because in the event there was an invasion of Taiwan, United States Navy would have no trouble sealing off the Straits of Malacca, and China couldn't do anything about it. Their ships would have to go all the way around. So they're looking for alternatives.
Yeah.
Russia, the same from Vladivostok. Mineral exports from Siberia. Again, they have to go usually by train. And don't hold your breath to St. Petersburg or somewhere.
Oh, man.
Or they could sail from Vladivostok, but then they still got to go all the way down through the Panama Canal or through the Straits of Malacca. China and Russia would both like the Northwest Passage. So would Canada, obviously.
Yeah.
But Canada's not doing crazy things.
Absolutely. Jacob, thank you so much for this time. I know it was an abbreviated version of catching up. We condensed it in as much as we can. You got to get on the road. You got to fight that crazy traffic that's in LA, and you got to get over here and teach tomorrow. So we'll let you go. Final thoughts, Jacob. Final thoughts to the viewers that are here. And by the way, thank you so much for those who came on and watched us. So such a blessing to have you. Jacob Prasch, final words.
My final words. Never set dates. Never speculate about what is the outcome going to be in the short to medium term. But in the medium to long term, it's exactly what the book of Daniel, the book of Zechariah, and the book of Revelation said are going to happen. They are happening. The events that Jesus predicted in the Olivet Discourse and that the apostles explained are already happening. He is coming. May we all be ready. Let's prepare the way for his return by telling people he is coming and that they need to put their faith in him before it's too late. Thank you so very much. God bless.
Thank you, Jacob. We'll see you tomorrow for sure. We'll see you tonight. God bless you, brother.
God bless. Well, blessings in Jesus, dear friends. Thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your prayers, your support, certainly, but above all, we appreciate the grace of the Lord in having you be with us. If you are blessed, edified, challenged, encouraged by what you have been hearing on Moriel, we would certainly ask you to subscribe, to give us a thumbs up, and to tell your Christian friends about us, and even tell your unsaved friends about us in the hope and prayer they will hear the gospel and become Christians. Thank you so very much. My name is James Jacob Prasch, Moriel Ministries. God bless you all.